Letters from my future self, but why were they warning me about love? The world gives you plenty of warnings. The flickering orange light on the dashboard, the smell of smoke before the fire, the sudden, sharp drop in the stock market. But nothing prepares you for a warning delivered directly to your past self by your future self. I'm Ethan, 28, and a few months ago, I started receiving typed, single-page letters dropped mysteriously into my mailbox. They weren't about the lottery or career moves, they were urgent, cryptic warnings about love. The first one arrived on a Tuesday. It wasn't postmarked, it was just folded and slipped into the slot. The paper was expensive, watermarked stock I immediately recognized, the exact paper I kept locked in my desk for writing legal documents. The typewriter font was precise, almost brutal in its starkness. The message was brief: stop looking for the perfect apartment on Grand Street. The view is a lie. The price you pay is too high. That stunned me. I was apartment hunting, specifically on Grand Street, and I was scheduled to sign a lease on a place that afternoon. It was eerie, but easily dismissed as a coincidence. Maybe a prank. I tossed it in the trash, signed the lease later that day, and moved in the following week. Then came the second letter, a week later. It was waiting in the same spot, same paper, same chilling font. The 4th of July party at the yacht club. Wear the blue suit. Do not accept the third champagne glass. The spill changes everything. I hadn't planned to attend any yacht club party, but I called my old university friend, Mark, who was deep in that social scene, just to check. He laughed and confirmed. His parents were hosting their annual, huge 4th of July bash at the Newport Yacht Club. He told me, almost casually, that I should definitely attend, and even mentioned the dress code was formal. The hair stood up on my arms. This wasn't a prank. The details were too specific, too niche. I didn't own a blue suit. I didn't know anyone who would know these details. The only person who would know about that party, that apartment, and the exact paper I used was me. I pulled the first letter out of the trash, now slightly crumpled, the ink still stark. The realization hit me. Somehow, my future self, a version of me living years from now, was communicating across time. The life lesson that hit me first was overwhelming. The future isn't fixed, it's a series of dangerous opportunities, and I was being handed the map. My initial impulse was panic, quickly replaced by a giddy sense of omnipotence. But why the yacht club? And why the champagne? I bought the blue suit. I attended the party. I was there, a skeptical ghost in a sea of linen, nursing a bottle of sparkling water. I watched the bar, ready to dodge the third champagne glass, like a ticking bomb. The moment she walked in, the entire room seemed to dim slightly around her, leaving her in sharp focus. Her name was Lila, 29, introduced to me by Mark. She was brilliant, an architect with a laugh that sounded like wind chimes, and eyes that held a knowing, playful curiosity. We talked for hours, not about the yacht club noise, but about computational physics, the failure of modern urban planning, and the precise moment you realize you're falling in love with a piece of art. We were inseparable from that night forward. She was the one, the missing piece of the puzzle I didn't even know I was solving. I hadn't just met a woman, I had met my destiny. And then, I remembered the champagne warning. I had been so preoccupied with avoiding the bar that I hadn't realized Lila was holding a champagne glass when we met. She had held it, gestured with it, and placed it on a passing tray when we moved to the terrace. I checked my suit, it was immaculate. I hadn't spilled anything, and nothing had been spilled on me. The letter was wrong, or maybe, I thought with immense, self-satisfied relief, I had successfully changed the future. I had been warned about the environment, and by altering my behavior, I had met Lila without the spill occurring. I felt like a hero of my own destiny, confident that I could handle any warning. The third letter arrived a week after the party, and it wasn't about avoiding a spill anymore. It was about her. You are moving too fast. Stop planning the trip to the Mediterranean this November. She will ask you to bring a silver locket. Do not bring the locket. Do not go on that trip. This was terrifyingly specific. Lila had just mentioned, 2 days prior, her dream of visiting the Amalfi Coast in November. She hadn't mentioned a locket yet, but the synchronicity was too profound to ignore. My future self wasn't warning me about a career mistake, he was warning me about the one person who finally made my life feel whole. The profound contradiction started to eat at me. How could something so right be the source of my future self's immense regret? If you received a letter from your future self warning you away from the most incredible person you had ever met, who made you happier than you thought possible, would you break up with them immediately? Or would you search for the truth? I couldn't leave Lila. I loved her, blindly, completely. Every day with her was a vibrant refutation of the warnings. She was kind to strangers, passionately dedicated to her work, and utterly devoted to me. I started to rationalize the letters. Maybe future Ethan was cynical, broken by something else, and was blaming the best thing that ever happened to him. Maybe he became a pessimist and lost the ability to see true happiness. I didn't tell Lila about the letters. That would have been insane. But I secretly started testing them. The fourth letter, cryptic and desperate, arrived 2 months later, right after we had exchanged keys and started talking about moving in together. The small brass box, she will ask you to store it for safekeeping when she goes to her mother's. Look inside. Do not return it without knowing what you hold. The very next week, Lila casually mentioned she was visiting her mother, Helen, 55, in California for a long weekend. She handed me a tiny, beautiful brass box, antique and heavy. It's just sentimental stuff from my grandmother, she said, her smile utterly genuine. Keep it safe for me, okay? You're the only person I trust completely. My hand trembled as I took it. My mind was screaming, look inside. I couldn't betray her trust. That was the core of my identity. If I broke her trust based on an anonymous, bizarre warning, what kind of person did that make me? I put the box in my secure filing cabinet, telling myself the future me was wrong, or worse, was asking me to compromise my ethics. I confused loyalty with denial, a fatal flaw I would later understand. I focused on the tangible truth. Lila made me a better person. She made me want to host dinners, read poetry again, and look up from my screen. The happiness was real, immediate, and all-consuming. The trip to the Mediterranean approached. Lila had finally booked the tickets for the Amalfi Coast. 2 days before our scheduled departure, the 5th letter arrived, sealed with a furious slash of red marker. It was longer, almost a desperate plea. The locket is a key. I tried to tell you before. The locket is necessary for the withdrawal. The withdrawal is the key to everything. If you go on that trip, you cross the line. You cannot come back from that November trip. Listen to me, you are my only hope. Do not bring the locket. I felt physically sick. The word, withdrawal, didn't make sense. Was it financial, emotional, medical? It was an aggressive, panicked command. I raced home. I pulled the brass box out of the cabinet, my hands shaking. I needed to see what was inside. I needed to know if the locket was in there. The small latch was stiff. I finally pried it open. It was empty. Just velvet lining. No locket. No sentimental items. Nothing. I sank onto the floor, overwhelmed by relief and confusion. My future self was correct about the box, correct about the date, correct about the mother's trip, but wrong about the contents. He was close, but he wasn't perfectly omniscient. I rationalized it as a near miss, a proof that the future could be slightly altered. I told Lila about the locket warning that night, omitting the future self part, just framing it as a weird premonition I had. She looked surprised. A locket? That's bizarre. Maybe you mean the necklace I gave my cousin last month. She dismissed it with a gentle shrug and kissed my forehead. You worry too much, my brilliant, anxious love. Let's just enjoy Italy. The next day, she flew to California early to see her mother before meeting me in Rome. I went through with the trip, confident I had successfully navigated the danger by simply being honest with her and finding the box empty. I arrived in Rome. Lila arrived a day later, and we took the train down the coast. It was paradise. The air was warm, the food was perfect, and our connection was deeper than ever. I felt immense pride that I had chosen love and happiness over paranoia. Future Ethan was a ghost of fear, and I was the master of my own fate. The 6th letter arrived on my old Grand Street apartment doorstep, delivered by an internal mail courier who must have been paid a fortune. The handwriting was different this time, not typed, but scrawled in an agonizing, desperate longhand. It was dated 5 years in the future. This letter didn't contain a warning, it contained a confirmation. Look at your right wrist, Ethan. Below the ulna, see the tiny, faint scar shaped like an asterisk. I got that 3 years after your 28th birthday, during the storm at the cabin. It's impossible to explain the context now, but if you see that scar, if you feel it now, you know that everything I've told you is true. You know that I am you, and you know that you have run out of time to stop the final, necessary sacrifice. I froze. I was on the balcony of a small rental in Positano, the setting sun turning the Mediterranean gold. I pulled back the sleeve of my linen shirt. I stared at my right wrist. Nothing, just smooth, sun-tanned skin. But as I slowly ran my thumb over the bone below the ulna, I felt a slight, uneven texture, a tiny, faint, healed prick mark. I leaned closer. There, barely visible, was the ghost of a scar. It wasn't present when I left for the trip. It was tiny, almost invisible, shaped exactly like a small asterisk. I hadn't received the scar yet. The future Ethan had, but in this moment, the moment I read the letter, the scar manifested on my past self. I wasn't changing the future was closing around me. The letters weren't advisory, they were prophetic. I wasn't dealing with a possibility of betrayal, I was dealing with a certainty. My future self, scarred and desperate, had sacrificed something to send these warnings, and I had ignored every single one for the sake of a beautiful facade. I looked at the scrawled handwriting again. Final, necessary sacrifice. The final, 7th letter was tucked into the envelope with the confirmation. It was the most important, and the most frightening. It contained no dates, no places, only philosophical, painful instruction. The choice is not between losing her or keeping her. The choice is between ruining yourself or destroying the lie. Do not let her use the access key. The lie is about control, not love. You cannot let her succeed in the transfer. If the transfer is completed, everything you have ever built, everything you are, is gone. Save your legacy, Ethan. Your legacy is your only defense against the inevitable loss. I stood on that balcony, the beautiful Amalfi Coast suddenly feeling like a gilded cage. I knew the letters were real. I knew the happiness I felt was manufactured, a bait to lead me to this, necessary sacrifice. The contradiction was a deep wound. How could the most loving, genuine person I knew be an agent of my total ruin? I immediately started reviewing the last year of my life, the life I had shared with Lila. I ran my company, a high-tech financial analytics firm, entirely remotely. All my sensitive corporate data, the proprietary algorithms that made me a multimillionaire, were stored on a cloud server only accessible through a complex, biometric and password-protected key. And the locket. The brass box was empty, but she had mentioned a locket. Was it truly a key? I checked the booking for the trip. Lila had booked a 1-week cruise leaving from Naples, 4 days from now, taking us into international waters. The only place where I would be entirely cut off from outside help, and where my network security would be dependent only on the local hardware. The urgency of the 7th letter became crystalline. The transfer, the access key, the destruction of my legacy. I had to choose. I could confront her, risking immediate, devastating emotional fallout and likely exposing the entire plot before I understood the mechanics of the betrayal. Or I could wait, maintain the facade of love, and try to uncover the access key before the cruise left Naples. The hardest part was the pervasive, nauseating doubt. I watched her across the room, humming a tune as she packed a small bag for a day trip to Capri. She looked angelic, genuinely happy. Could this person, who Who brought such light into my life, be a calculated agent of my financial and professional destruction? The life lesson I finally understood was devastating. The heart's capacity for denial is its greatest vulnerability, blinding us to the clearest signs of danger. I couldn't just ruin this perfect moment with an accusation based on letters from a scarred, future version of myself. I needed proof. I went to the safe in our rental house. I pulled out my corporate access key, a small, titanium drive containing the encryption keys to my entire empire. I held it in my hand. It was the only way she could execute the transfer. I was supposed to be keeping it safe. I had earned all my success through logic, data, and rigorous analysis. Now, my survival depended on acting against my deepest emotional attachment, solely on the word of a desperate future version of myself. What would you choose? Hand the corporate access key over to the police immediately, or risk waiting 2 more days to gather irrefutable proof, knowing that delay might cost you everything you've built? The sun had set, and the gold had turned to a deep, dangerous cobalt blue. I knew the time for denial was over. I had been warned about love, not because it was bad, but because the love I felt was the most effective weapon against my logic. The game was in play, and I was holding the key to my own destruction. I just needed to know why. I want to know what you think. Should I trust my heart, or the desperate, final warning from my future self? Let me know your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.